The lock clicked open to reveal the unexpected. Brianna stepped into a secret gallery, a breathtaking collection where every single piece of her art was displayed as if it were a masterpiece. For years, her mother's closest friend had been secretly gathering her creations. Trapped amidst a lifetime of his hidden admiration, Alan finally confronted her with the secret he'd guarded since she was 18. Hello to my wonderful Pride family and welcome back. I have another incredible story to share with you all today. Your support is everything to me, and I promise to keep sharing these powerful stories with you as I grow on this journey day by day. And if you're new here, I'd love to meet you. Say hello in the comments and let me know where you're watching from. Make sure you subscribe so you can officially join our amazing Pride family. A torrential downpour lashed against the windows of the Uber as it climbed the serpentine road to the Jackson estate. Brianna leaned against the cool glass, her breath fogging the pain, as she watched raindrops streak horizontally, warping the manicured glow of the landscape lights lining the cliffs. 3 long years had passed since she traveled this road. 3 years since she had last set foot in the sprawling Alpine mansion, a monolith of glass and steel that seemed to float like a storm cloud over the world below. The last time she was just finishing her undergraduate degree at Berkeley, home for a fleeting Christmas break before heading back to the West Coast. The last time she could still tell herself the frantic skip in her heartbeat whenever Alan Jackson walked in was just a holdover from a childhood crush. Her ride glided past imposing iron gates that swung inward without a sound, as though the estate itself was welcoming her home. A knot tightened in Brianna's stomach, an unease she refused to acknowledge. Her mother had insisted everything was taken care of, that Alan was ready for her. But what Thessaly, her mom, failed to mention a detail Brianna only learned in a frantic call from the airport was that she had flown to London hours ago. 6 months in London. 6 months of Brianna staying here in this house with him. The house materialized from the deluge like a vision, a fortress of sharp lines and immense windows mirroring the storm's rage. A warm glow emanated from the western wing from the room she knew was Alan's private study. Her heart began to pound. After helping with her luggage, the Uber driver gave the estate a look of undisguised awe, then gratefully accepted her large tip and disappeared back down the drive. And just like that, Brianna was alone again, left standing in the downpour, her finger hesitating over the doorbell, debating whether she could still call her mother and demand to know what kind of game she was playing. Before her finger could make contact, the door swung open. Alan was a silhouette against the light, and in that instant, all the air left Brianna's lungs. He was dressed in dark trousers and a crisp white shirt, sleeves pushed up to his forearms and the top buttons undone, revealing the faint hollow at the base of his neck. Streaks of silver like spun metal cut through his dark hair, which looked as though he'd just run his fingers through it in frustration. At 55, he possessed a quiet power that commanded the attention of entire boardrooms without a single word. Yet in this moment, as his captivating gaze fell upon her, he seemed utterly unguarded. Brianna. Her name was a whisper, equal parts reverence and regret. He visibly reined himself in his jaw, clenching as he took a step back. You're drenched. Please get inside. She brushed past him into the foyer's warmth, painfully conscious of every drop of rainwater that fell from her coat onto the polished marble. The lock clicked turned shut, trapping them in a sudden suffocating unanimity. Silence descended, broken only by the relentless storm outside and the frantic drumming of her own heart. I had no idea Mom was already gone, Brianna managed, despising the tremor in her own voice. She told me she'd be here to meet me. An unreadable emotion flashed across Alan's features, gone before she could decipher it. Her flight was changed last minute, he said. An urgent matter came up in London. He closed the distance between them with deliberate, measured steps. Allow me. His hands went to the collar of her drenched jacket, and Brianna could only nod, her voice having abandoned her. As he eased the coat from her shoulders, his fingers grazed the sensitive skin of her neck, and a jolt hot as a brand shot through her. The moment froze them both. The jacket dangled from his hand, completely forgotten. Outside, the rain beat a furious rhythm, but inside, an old, forbidden energy, something Brianna had suppressed for 6 long years, crackled in the charged air between their locked gazes. Alan retreated so abruptly he almost lost his balance. In a fluid motion, he disposed of the jacket in a nearby closet. When he faced her again, his features had been rearranged into a mask of polite hospitality. But Brianna saw that his hands trembled slightly as he turned to the bar cart in the adjoining living room. Wine, he offered. You must be exhausted from your travels. Yes, thank you. She followed him into the great room, an expanse of glass that framed the glittering expanse of the New York City skyline across the Hudson River. Even with the storm raging, the vista was absolutely stunning. Alan filled 2 glasses with a deep red wine, his focus on the task so intense, it was clear he was using it to avoid her gaze. As he passed her the wine, his fingers recoiled just enough to avoid her touch. "Your room is prepared," he said, his voice a low rasp she didn't recognize. "Your mother insisted you have a place for your work, for your art. I've arranged the studio for you. It overlooks the river. Pure north-facing light. I recalled you mentioning you preferred north light in one of your emails to Thessaly." Brianna's breath hitched. "You read my emails to my mother." A dark flush stained his throat. "Only the ones she forwards. She is incredibly proud of you. The residency at the Jersey City Arts Collective. Your upcoming exhibition, it's all she speaks of." He broke eye contact, drifting toward the windows, as if the raging storm outside commanded his full attention. "I've followed your work, Brianna. Your thesis project was extraordinary. The way you found beauty in urban decay, it was magnificent. You have your father's eye for that." Julian could find grace in ruins. The mention of her father should have felt easy, natural. Alan and Julian had been inseparable after all. Or so the official story went. But the sudden tension that seized his shoulders, the way his knuckles bleached white around the stem of his glass, hinted at a history she'd never been told. "I hardly remember him," she confessed, her voice a near whisper. She created a gulf between them, their ghostly reflections staring back from the storm-slicked glass. "I was only 3 when he passed. He would have been impossibly proud of you." Alan's voice was raw with some unnamed emotion. "You've become—" He bit the words off, swallowing them down with a long pull from his glass. "You must be exhausted. Let me show you to your room." But the space between them remained charged and static. Rain lashed against the panes in a furious rhythm, melting the city lights into a watercolor blur beyond the glass. Brianna watched his reflection, the hard angle of his jaw, the solid frame of his shoulders. He held himself with a terrifying stillness, as if a single exhale might shatter him completely. "Why didn't you come to my graduation?" The words were out before she could catch them. "Mom said there was an emergency. Singapore. But I looked for you in the crowd." Alan's eyes shut, a flicker of pain crossing his face. "I was in Singapore," he confirmed, "but I watched it all. I had my assistant stream it live. I saw you cross the stage. I saw you receive your honors. I saw you." His voice broke on the last word. "The flowers. The lilies. They were from me." Her breath snagged in her throat. The massive spray of white lilies that had been waiting for her when she got back to her apartment. The card had only a single stark initial A. She'd mistaken it for a D, assuming it was from David, a classmate who wouldn't leave her alone. She had tossed them without a second thought. "I threw them out," she whispered, the confession hanging in the air. Alan flinched, a sharp, violent motion as if she'd physically struck him. "You what?" The words were sharp, wounded. He recovered instantly. "No, of course, you couldn't have known. I don't blame you." "Then why not just sign your name?" "Because I hoped you would just know." He placed his glass on the table with a slow, deliberate precision that screamed of restraint. "Come, I'll show you to your room." This time, when he turned for the hall, Brianna followed. Silence stretched between them as they moved down a corridor hung with museum-quality art. He maintained a precise, calculated distance from her, a buffer zone of polite fiction. He led her to the east wing opening, a door to a suite that stole the air from her lungs. An entire wall of glass framed the raging storm and the glittering chaos of the city below. A colossal 4-poster bed anchored the main room, and through an archway she saw a studio pulled from her most secret, ambitious dreams. Pristine easels, blank canvases, and every supply she could imagine, all organized with an unnerving precision. How did you know?" Her hand ghosted over a set of sable brushes, the exact expensive brand she favored. These are the ones I use." "Your mother mentioned it." But the lie was a tangible thing, heavy and awkward in the air between them. Thessaly wouldn't have known the brand. She wouldn't have cared. This was Alan. This meticulous, unnerving attention to detail was all him. This strange, invasive knowledge of her life. She turned. He was a silhouette in the doorway, refusing to step inside, as if the threshold itself were a line he was forbidden to cross. The light from the room haloed him, throwing his face into deep shadow, but she felt his stare on her like a physical touch. "Why do I get the feeling you're afraid of me?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I'm not afraid of you, Brianna." His voice was gravel and rust. "I'm afraid of—" He cut himself off, his knuckles turning white where he gripped the doorframe. "Get some rest." If you need anything, my rooms are in the West Wing, the opposite end of the vast apartment, as far away as he could possibly be. Alan. She hadn't meant to say his name, it just slipped out. A test to see what would happen. He froze. The silence in the hallway became absolute, a vacuum finally broken by the low rumble of thunder over the river. She saw the blood drain from his knuckles again, saw the frantic rhythm of a muscle twitching in his jaw. He was fighting a war with words he refused to speak. "Good night, Brianna." He finally ground out the words, sounding torn from his throat. And then he was gone. He didn't walk away. He retreated, his long, controlled strides a clear and desperate flight. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she stood in the center of the cavernous room, pressing her palm flat against the door he had just closed, sealing her in. On the other side of profound silence, then the ragged sound of his breathing, harsh and broken. He murmured something, the words too low and thick with emotion to decipher. Then his footsteps finally faded down the hall, leaving her alone with the raging storm outside and a terrifying certainty that settled deep in her soul. This summer was going to shatter everything. The next 3 days became a tense, silent dance of calculated avoidance and charged proximity. Alan was gone before the sun even considered rising, heading to his office in Manhattan. He vanished before Brianna would wake to the impossible discovery of fresh coffee waiting in a carafe that held it at the absolute perfect temperature. Her favorite creamer, that ridiculously expensive vanilla bean she'd mentioned to her mother, once sat waiting in the fridge. Breakfast was a daily miracle, perfectly tailored to her every preference. There were bagels from the tiny shop she'd obsessed over during an internship in the city 4 long years ago. He was caring for her from a distance, and the ghost of his constant, silent attention felt more intimate than any physical presence she had ever known. Brianna lost herself in her painting during the afternoons, and when the restlessness became too much to bear, she explored the sprawling mansion. The house itself was an enigma, a shell of modern architecture, holding a heart of classical art, with minimalist furniture standing beside priceless heirlooms. She found herself hunting for the small details, the little clues that exposed the man behind the monolithic billionaire facade. Books on architectural theory were pushed up against worn volumes of poetry. His vinyl collection was a chaotic mix of cool jazz and furious punk rock. And then she found the photographs in their simple silver frames. Many of her mother, but even more of her. Brianna at 5, her hands a disaster of paint. At 12, clutching a blue ribbon from a local art fair, her hand reached out and picked up the photograph from her 16th birthday party. She was standing in a garden she now recognized as the grounds of this very estate, her head thrown back in laughter at something just beyond the frame. But what made the air catch in her throat was the other figure, half hidden at the edge of the picture. Alan. He was watching her, and the expression on his face, even partially obscured, was one of raw, undeniable longing. Had he always looked at her that way? Or was she just projecting her own desperate hopes? Was she seeing only what she wanted to see? On the 4th afternoon, drowning in her own company, Brianna found a door she'd never noticed before. It was hidden away in a deep cove on the 2nd floor. This one was different. It was made of a dark, imposing wood, and the electronic lock gleamed with an unsettling newness. She tried the handle, not expecting it to yield. It didn't. Brianna bit her lip, her eyes narrowing as she studied the lock. It was a good one for sure, but a semester spent in an Oakland artist collective liberating abandoned buildings for art installations had taught her a thing or two. Her tools were upstairs. It took her 15 minutes to retrieve the small kit and another 20 minutes of delicate, painstaking work. The lock disengaged with a soft click that sounded like a thunderclap in the silent house. The room beyond was pitch black. Brianna's hand fumbled along the wall for a switch, and the light that flooded the space made her heart completely stop. It was a gallery, a private, professionally curated gallery with track lighting, climate control, and a security system that could rival the Museum of Modern Art. And every last piece of art mounted, framed, and protected behind museum-grade glass was hers. Brianna stepped into the room as if walking through a dream. There, framed like a masterwork, was a finger painting she had made in kindergarten. Her awkward charcoal sketches from middle school were preserved behind glass. Watercolors from high school lined the next wall. Her entire oil painting series from her undergraduate thesis was there, pieces she thought had been utterly destroyed in a studio flood. Here they were, perfectly preserved, perfectly restored. Across the far wall, her graduate work was projected in a massive rotating display. And in the very center of the room, honored with its own dedicated lighting, hung the painting she had made when she was 16. The New York City skyline at sunset painted from the cliffs just outside these walls. She'd poured her entire soul into it that summer, but had to leave it behind, too large to ship home to California. For years, she had simply assumed it had been thrown away. Beneath it, a small brass plaque read, "The artist's first masterpiece." Brianna's vision completely blurred with tears. This wasn't support. This was obsession. This was a terrifying, all-consuming devotion. This was, you picked the lock. She spun around to find Alan standing in the doorway. He was in a suit, but his jacket was off, and his tie was loose, as if he'd just walked in from the city. But it was the look on his face that made her stop breathing. Every defense he ever had was gone. He looked stripped, bare, raw, caught in a truth he had clearly spent a lifetime hiding. "What is this?" she asked, her voice a mere tremble. I... He crossed the threshold into the gallery, and for the first time in days, he shattered the careful distance he'd kept between them. He moved toward her until only a few feet remained, until she could see the violent storm churning in his gray eyes. "I couldn't let them go. Every piece you ever created, every single glimpse into the way your mind works, I couldn't let any of it just disappear. This painting," she whispered, "I left this here 8 years ago." "I know you did," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I kept everything." Alan's hands flexed into fists at his sides, as if he was physically restraining himself from reaching for her. "Every Christmas card you ever made, every sketch in a notebook, everything your mother ever happened to mention. Every time you went to discard something, I'd be there asking to take it off your hands." She mistook it for sentimentality over Julian believing I wanted to save relics of his daughter's past. It wasn't that. It was never about him. The silent admission hung in the space between them. Brianna surveyed the gallery with an entirely new perspective. Decades of her own history curated with a love bordering on worship. "Why?" she breathed. "Because your work," Alan's voice shattered on the words. "Because I have witnessed you become the single most extraordinary artist I have ever known. And I couldn't bear the thought of these creations being lost. You deserve a legacy, to be celebrated, preserved. You speak of me as if I'm a canvas, not a person." "No." The word was a blade, fierce and sharp. He closed the distance by another step. He was near enough now for Brianna to discern the faint lines etched around his eyes, the exact shade of silver threaded through his hair, the tick of a muscle in his clenched jaw. "If you were merely art, this would be simple. Art can be collected, admired from afar, secured behind a locked door. But you are vibrant and real and so painfully brilliant, and I can't..." He cut himself off, pivoting away abruptly. His shoulders heaved with ragged breaths. Brianna's pulse hammered against her ribs. "You can't what?" "I cannot have this conversation with you." Alan's voice was taut with strain. "You are 24 years old. You are Thessaly's daughter. You are Julian's. And I am 55, Brianna. I'm your father's closest friend and a friend to your mother. I have known you since you were 3. The reality that I... His hands balled into fists at his sides. "I was wrong to keep these. So very wrong. This is completely inappropriate." "I'm the one who's inappropriate." Brianna moved on pure instinct, erasing the space between them until they were barely an inch apart. "Look at me," she insisted. "Alan, I can't." "Look at me." He turned agonizingly slow, and the raw, undisguised need in his gaze almost buckled her knees. There was a definite hunger there, but it was tangled with desperation, with a deep self-loathing, and with a sliver of something that looked devastatingly like hope. "How long?" Brianna whispered. "How long have you..." The question died on her lips. "Too long." His voice was a ghost of a sound. "Since you were far younger than you should have been. Since the day I stopped seeing Julian's little girl and started seeing the woman who could incinerate my entire world with her presence alone. I've fought it. I've tried to bury it. Do you have any idea how many family events I've actively avoided, terrified I couldn't control myself in the same room with you? Do you have any concept of the number of relationships I've deliberately destroyed because the woman I was with wasn't you?" Alan squeezed his eyes shut. "This is so wrong. Every single thing I feel for you is wrong. But what if it isn't?" The words spilled from her, reckless and absolute. "What if I admitted I've been secretly sketching you for years? That I have entire books filled with drawings of your hands, the line of your profile, the intense way you study the skyline as if it holds some great secret? What if I confessed that every man I've ever tried to be with was ultimately a disappointment because he could never be you?" "No, stop. Don't do this." Alan's eyes snapped open, blazing with a terrible fire. "Don't you dare give me hope for something that is utterly impossible." "Why is it impossible?" Because you are 24, Alan roared. I am a grown woman, Alan. I have been for 6 years. A grown woman I watched learn to walk. A woman whose father was my brother in all but blood. A woman whose mother puts her faith in me. His voice cracked. Thessaly trusts me with you. And how would you be betraying that trust by finally being honest about what we're both feeling? The challenge hung in the air between them. It was a dangerous electric thing. Alan just stared and she watched the war rage within him, propriety against passion, duty against desire. Tell me you feel nothing, Brianna urged, her voice a soft, unyielding force. Tell me I'm misreading the way your eyes follow me when you think I'm not aware. Tell me this entire gallery is nothing more than an appreciation for the craft. Tell me you just happen to know my favorite brand of coffee creamer because Thessaly mentioned it and not because you've been memorizing the details of my life for years. Tell me that and I will leave. We can erase this moment as if it never occurred. Alan's breathing was shallow and fast. I can't tell you that. Then tell me the truth. For an eternity he was silent, his gaze locked on hers. Then, as if the words were being physically torn from his soul, he finally spoke. The truth is that I have been hopelessly in love with you since you turned 18 years old. It started the day you returned from your first term at Berkeley, your eyes alive with fire as you talked about color theory and urban decay. The truth is I despise myself for it. I have tried absolutely everything to extinguish it. Therapy, keeping my distance, other women, nothing ever works. The truth is that having you here in this house, living under my roof, it is the most exquisite form of torture I have ever known. The truth is I get up at 4 in the morning every day simply to prepare your coffee because those 20 minutes alone in the kitchen, arranging things just the way you like them, is the closest I ever allow myself to caring for you in the way that He choked on the words. The truth is you are the most magnificent thing I have ever laid eyes on, and I will never ever be worthy of you. Tears burned in Brianna's eyes. You're my mother's friend. She whispered the words, a hollow protest against the storm inside her that screamed for her to close the final gap between them. This is impossible, not because I don't feel the same way, but because I'm terrified she would never understand. He'd said the words to put things back in their proper place, to rebuild the boundary he had just obliterated. But the rejection hit Alan like a physical blow. A tremor of raw pain crossed his face before he managed to mask it. He gave a single sharp nod, his jaw tight. You're right. His voice was arctic now, the billionaire back in command of his fortress. Of course you're right. I want to apologize. That conversation was completely inappropriate. I'll arrange for a car to take you to your residence in the morning if you no longer feel comfortable here. I never said I was uncomfortable. He went perfectly still. I said it was wrong. Brianna pressed her heart, slamming against her ribs. That doesn't mean I want to leave. Alan turned back to face her so slowly, and the naked hope that blazed in his eyes was agonizing to see. Brianna, I have to find some way to make my mother see, he said, his voice raw. I know. He moved towards the doorway with stiff, overly controlled steps. I will be in my study should you need anything at all. Or I can stay at my apartment in Manhattan if you would rather have the house to yourself. Don't go. The plea escaped her before Brianna could stop it. Please, I need to process this, but please don't leave. The ironclad control in his expression finally seemed to soften. I'll stay for as long as you'll have me here. Then he left her, standing alone in a gallery born from love, surrounded by decades of irrefutable devotion. Brianna's legs gave out, and she sank onto the bench at the room's center, finally letting herself break, overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his confession. She knew that somewhere else in this cavernous house, Alan was probably falling apart too. The issue was never whether they wanted each other. His confession had stripped that truth bare, leaving it painful and exposed. The question was whether that wanting could ever be enough to justify burning down every single line that separated them. Brianna didn't have an answer, but as she gazed around at a lifetime of her own art preserved with an almost holy reverence, as she remembered how Alan had confessed his love as if it were a mortal sin, she felt an answer gathering deep in her soul like a coming storm. The storm that had been brewing all week finally broke 3 days later. Brianna had moved through the last 72 hours in a daze, pouring her frantic confusion onto canvas, while Alan kept a careful, agonizing distance. They orbited one another in the mansion like twin stars bound by an inescapable gravity, but held apart by the certainty of mutual destruction. He still left a cup of coffee for her every morning, She still found reasons to walk into rooms he'd just departed, breathing in the ghost of his presence. The tension mounted between them until the very air in the house felt like it was humming with electricity. And then Thursday night delivered a thunderstorm that shook the windows in their frames and turned the world outside stark and white. Brianna had been deathly afraid of storms since childhood, a phobia born from some half-forgotten trauma her mother was never able to explain. By midnight, she was sitting up in bed with every single light on, trying to read while thunder rattled the glass and adrenaline coursed through her veins. She held out until 1 o'clock in the morning before she finally surrendered. She needed a distraction, something, anything other than the storm outside and the maelstrom of her own thoughts. Without allowing a second thought, she pulled a robe on over her shorts and tank top and padded barefoot through the dark, silent house, drawn toward the only sliver of light she could see, the one coming from under Alan's study door. She found him there, a dark silhouette, standing before the massive windows framed against the storm-ravaged city. On a side table sat 2 glasses of wine poured as if he had been waiting for her. He didn't turn as she slipped inside, but she saw his shoulders tense. "You've been afraid of storms since you were 7, he said quietly. "A tree fell on your school. You were inside the building. Thessaly told me you suffered from nightmares for months after." "My mom said I was 6, actually." Brianna drifted further into the room, pulled toward him against every rational warning bell clanging in her head. "And you remember that?" "I remember everything about you." He still hadn't turned. "The glass on the left is yours." "Pinot Noir. You mentioned in an Instagram post 8 months ago that you preferred it." Brianna's breath hitched in her throat. "You follow my Instagram from a fake account." "I didn't want you to know I was—" He let the sentence die. "The wine is for you if you want it." She picked up the glass, her hand shaking. A sudden, blinding flash of lightning lit up the room, and thunder cracked almost immediately overhead. Brianna flinched instinctively, and finally Alan turned to face her. He was just in pajama pants and a t-shirt, more unguarded than she had ever seen him, with his hair disheveled and his feet bare. The sheer intimacy of it, of seeing him like this, stole the air from her lungs. "You should go back to bed," he said, but his voice held zero conviction. I'm not really tired anymore." "Brianna," her name was a warning and a prayer, "we're alone in the middle of the night. You're wearing— I am trying very, very hard to be a gentleman here, and you are making it— What am I making it?" She took another step, closing the space between them. "Impossible." He bit out the word, sounding rough and torn. "Do you have any idea what it is costing me not to—" He dragged a hand through his hair, his composure finally cracking. 3 days. I have been in absolute agony for 3 days, knowing what I told you, terrified that I destroyed our friendship, and hoping, God hoping you might—" A bitter laugh escaped him. "And what exactly were you hoping for? That you'd wake up one day and decide a 55-year-old man was your dream come true? That our entire history, the years between us, the tangled mess of our families, that none of it means a thing? And what if they don't matter?" Brianna's pulse was a frantic drum against her ribs. "What if I admitted that what you said at the gallery is all I've been able to think about? That I've tried to reason my way out of this and failed?" A shadow fell over Alan's expression. "You're not being rational. It's the middle of the night. The storm is making you anxious. You're feeling exposed. Don't you dare tell me what I'm feeling." The words were like shards of glass. "I'm 24 years old, Alan. I have 2 degrees. I've been independent for 6 years. I've navigated my own life. I know what I want. And my heart keeps returning to a single undeniable truth." "And what truth is that?" he asked. He posed the question like a man praying he wouldn't get an answer that could shatter everything. Brianna stepped into his space, erasing the final inches that separated them, forcing her to angle her head up to meet his eyes. "That I have been in love with you since I was 18 years old. Since the night you gave me that platinum artist palette for my birthday, and then vanished without a word. I drank too much champagne, and that night I wrote you a letter. I poured every single feeling onto the page and mailed it before I could lose my nerve." Alan froze, every muscle in his body rigid. "You did what?" He breathed, his face a perfect mask of confusion. "I told you everything," she said, her voice trembling. "That I loved you. That I knew you only saw a kid, but I would wait for you to finally see me. That I would be yours if you just—" Her voice broke. "Did you ever get it, the letter?" His silence was a confession stretching into an eternity before he moved, his motions slow and surreal like a man trapped underwater. Alan turned away and pressed a section of the library wall, A panel slid back, revealing a concealed safe. His hands trembled as he spun the dial. When he faced her again, he was holding a faded, time-worn envelope, her own teenage script scrawled across the front. 1,000 times, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I have this letter memorized, every single word, every curve of your penmanship, the small coffee ring in the corner. I know it all by heart. He squeezed his eyes shut. You were 18. 18, what could I possibly have done? Tell you I felt it too. Come after you, it was 37 years old, Brianna. So instead you did nothing. You let me believe you never even cared. I was trying to protect you, to do the honorable thing. He stopped, his gaze fixed on the letter as if it were both a sacred relic and a curse. Do you have any idea how many times I tried to write back? I have 3 different drafts written and sealed that I could never send. Every word felt like a betrayal of the promise I made to your father. A tremor ran through Alan's features. It doesn't matter. The point was you were too young, and what I feel is wrong. Brianna moved closer, her body almost brushing his, her hands clenched at her sides. I'm not 18 anymore. I know, he rasped, the sound torn from his throat. God, believe me, I know. Do you think I'm blind? Do you think having you here under my roof this close isn't absolute torture? A violent crack of thunder rattled the very glass in the windows. A flash of lightning bleached the room white, starkly illuminating the raw hunger and tortured desperation etched into every line of his face. I am fighting, he ground out, to be a better man than the one who wants his best friend's daughter so desperately he can't even breathe. And what if my father wouldn't have minded? Brianna's question was a soft counterpoint. He would have murdered me. Are you certain of that? Alan looked at her, completely thrown. What are you trying to say? You adored him. You've dedicated your life to looking after my mother and me, all because of some oath you took. But would my father truly want this for you? For you to live a solitary life, to sentence yourself to, this is not a punishment. But the word died on his lips. His breathing grew harsh and unsteady, his composure visibly cracking. You need to leave. Please, Brianna, he begged. I don't have the strength to fight this anymore, not tonight. Not when you're looking at me with that expression in your eyes. Like I want you, Brianna finished for him, her voice unwavering. Like I've wanted you for 6 years. Like I'm done pretending that I don't. Her name was a shattered whisper from his lips. A complete surrender. She lifted her hand, her movements deliberate, giving him every chance to stop her, and gently brushed her fingers through the strands of silver at his temples. Alan's eyes fluttered shut, his breath escaping in a ragged shudder. Tell me to walk away, she breathed. Tell me this isn't what you want, and I swear I will leave and never speak of it again. His own hand rose, closing around her wrist. But he didn't push her away. Instead, his thumb found the frantic beat of her pulse. I can't do that, he rasped. God help me, I can't. Look at me, Alan. Tell me what you really want. When his eyes opened, the raw, unguarded need she saw there was so powerful it almost buckled her knees. I want... His voice was a low rumble of gravel and smoke. I want to kiss you, so thoroughly that the memory of any other man's touch is erased from your skin. I want to memorize the sound of your pleasure, to discover every secret that makes you unravel. I want to feel you in my arms when I wake up and fall asleep to your name on my lips. I want all of it, and it's selfish and it's forbidden. Then take it, Brianna whispered, rising on her toes to press her lips to his. For a split second, Alan was completely still, paralyzed. Then a sound tore from his chest, part groan, part capitulation, and he pulled her hard against him. He kissed her back like a man who's finally found air, his fingers tangling in her hair to tilt her head, his tongue sweeping hungrily against her lips. Brianna gasped, her lips parting for him, and the kiss instantly transformed from desperate longing into a raw, consuming fire. The taste of him was a heady mix of vintage wine and raw desperation. A kiss that felt less like a kiss and more like a drowning man finding his only source of air. When they finally broke apart, they were both gasping, their bodies trembling with the aftershock. This is wrong, Alan breathed, but she smothered the words with her mouth. Don't think, she murmured against his lips. Just for tonight, stop thinking. That was all it took. He swept her into his arms, and her legs instinctively locked around his waist as he carried her toward the tempest-tossed windows. Beyond the glass, the storm waged war on the city, blurring the skyline into a chaotic masterpiece of rain-streaked light. He pinned her against the vast cold pane, the icy shock a stark contrast to the inferno of his touch. His mouth claimed hers again, not with hunger, but with a desperate need to brand the very taste of her onto his soul. Why you? He rasped against the frantic pulse in her throat. Of all the people in the world, why is it you my heart won't be quiet for? A fractured cry escaped Brianna's lips, and whatever restraint he had left shattered into a million pieces. His hands found the sash of her robe and yanked the knot free. As the silk parted, the air rushed from Alan's lungs. Beneath it, she wore only a flimsy tank top and a pair of sleep shorts. God, you're beautiful, he snarled the words almost in accusation, as if her very existence was a personal attack on his self-control. I fought this so hard, fought even thinking about you. She cut off his tortured confession with her own mouth utterly finished with words and doubt. She needed this to be real, a tangible certainty to prove it wasn't just another fantasy woven from lonely nights. Alan gave her that proof, his touch almost worshipful, as his fingers explored the line of her ribs, the gentle slope of her waist, and the strip of bare skin between fabric. The moment his thumb grazed the soft swell beneath her breast, a sharp gasp tore from her throat. He did it again, slow and deliberate, his gaze holding hers captive. A whimper escaped her. I want every sound you make, Alan commanded, his voice a low, possessive growl. Every single one. I've imagined this more times than I can count. And the reality is, he sealed his words with another kiss deeper, this time devastatingly thorough. Then take what you have no right to, Brianna dared him. A dark, dangerous chuckle rumbled in his chest. Be very careful what you ask for, Brianna. A man can only starve for so long, and I've been hungry for you for years. If I truly start, stopping won't be an option. His hands clamped onto her thighs, hoisting her higher as he pressed his hardness against her. Even through the frustrating barrier of their clothes, she felt the undeniable proof of his desire, and the knowledge that she was the one unraveling this man of iron control was intoxicating. Bedroom? She managed to choke out. Please. He didn't need another word. He moved through the shadowed halls with a predator's certainty, finally reaching the sanctuary of his suite in the West Wing. Here, walls of glass showcased the storm, its lightning flashes providing the only illumination as he laid her on the vast bed with a tenderness that defied the raw hunger in his eyes. This is your last chance to walk away, he said, his voice strained with effort. Because if we cross this line, she ended his struggle, lacing her fingers behind his neck and pulling him down. Then cross it with me, Alan. The final wall of his resolve crumbled. Brianna, he breathed her name, a prayer on his lips as they met hers again in a slow burn of profound emotion. His hands became explorers, charting the landscape of her body, leaving a trail of fire in their wake, as if marking her as his. When he lifted the thin fabric of her top, when his trembling hands cupped her fullness, when he gazed at her as if she were something sacred, her vision blurred with unshed tears. This was so much more than intimacy. It was a confession. It was devotion. It was years of forbidden longing, finally irrevocably unleashed. You're crying, he whispered, his thumb gently brushing away the moisture she hadn't felt fall. We can stop. No, she assured him, her voice thick. These are happy tears. It's just, no one has ever looked at me like I'm the only thing that matters in the entire world. Then every man you have ever been with, he said, his voice low and certain, was a complete and utter fool. And then he proceeded to prove it, dedicating himself to learning every inch of her, until she was a wreck of pleasure, crying out his name as wave after wave of ecstasy crested and crashed over her. When he finally moved above her, their bodies joining with an aching, deliberate slowness, they both froze, utterly overwhelmed by the sheer sensation of becoming one. I love you, he confessed, the words torn from him, fierce and undeniable. I know it's wrong. I know I shouldn't, but I love you, Brianna. I have for so long. I love you too, she whispered, arching into him. Show me. Make me feel how long you've wanted this. He did. As the storm howled its fury outside, they found their own primal perfect rhythm inside. And when she finally shattered in his arms, he let go completely, following her over the edge, with her name a sacred benediction on his lips. Lying tangled in the sheets later, the rain drumming a soft rhythm against the glass, she gently traced the silver at his temples, the map of the 29 years that lay between them. The years felt meaningless now. What happens next? She whispered into the quiet dark. He pulled her impossibly closer, pressing a kiss to her forehead. I don't know, he admitted, but I do know I'm not strong enough to ever let you go. Not now, perhaps not ever. He made love to her again with an aching slowness, his eyes devouring hers, as if committing every single one of her expressions to memory. When profound exhaustion finally claimed them, Brianna drifted to sleep, her entire world shrinking to the steady beat of his heart and the sound of a storm that had finally spent its rage. They couldn't have known this was merely the beginning, that a labyrinth of secrets still lay waiting, and that the past was not nearly done with them. For now, they existed only in these stolen hours of forbidden love sustained by the fragile hope that wanting each other this desperately might just be enough. The next 3 weeks became a blur of clandestine moments and a passion that burned hotter with each passing day. By daylight, Alan was the man of routine, leaving for work and returning each evening. But the nights belonged entirely to them. They laid claim to every room in that vast mansion. A frantic urgency soon gave way to a slow, deliberate exploration, a sacred process of learning each other's bodies with an intimacy that left them breathless. Alan whisked Brianna away to his penthouse in Hoboken, a sterile fortress of glass and chrome she never knew he owned. They made love right there on the balcony with the glittering Manhattan skyline as their only witness. He had her bent over the railing, moving inside her with a raw power, his hands a possessive brand on her hips, while his voice whispered dark praises into her ear. He took her sailing on his yacht, piloting the vessel up the Hudson as the sun bled across the horizon. Down in the galley, he cooked her dinner with his own hands, a gesture he admitted was a first for him, for anyone. They ate on the deck under a blanket of stars, and as the moon rose, Brianna sketched him, capturing the way the silver threaded through his hair, the unyielding line of his jaw, and the impossible softness in his eyes whenever they rested on her. "What's going through your mind?" she murmured as he watched her draw. "That I have no right to this, to you, to any of it." His voice was barely a whisper. "That I'm just waiting for someone to finally tally my debts and come to collect." Brianna set aside her sketchbook and gracefully moved to straddle his lap. "You haven't taken a single thing I didn't offer freely. You're 24. She insisted, pressing her fingertips gently to his lips. "I am an adult. I am choosing this. I am choosing you. When will you ever believe that?" He didn't answer with words. Instead, he kissed her, a slow, deep, consuming kiss, and then carried her back down to the cabin to show her with his body what his words could never express. But their connection was never just physical. Alan wanted to know her mind, her art, her dreams, and the fears she kept locked away. He listened as if every syllable she spoke was vital, asking questions that proved he wasn't just hearing her words, but understanding their meaning. He had read her entire graduate thesis, offering sharp opinions on her use of color and negative space. He challenged her perspective, pushed her to articulate her vision, and treated her mind with the same fierce reverence he showed her body. Brianna fell deeper in love with every debate, with every unguarded revelation. The powerful billionaire who dominated boardrooms was also a man who read poetry, who gave millions anonymously to art programs in underfunded schools, and who still mourned the best friend he had lost 21 years ago. She found herself sketching him constantly, his powerful hands on the steering wheel of his car, his profile as he was lost in thought in his study. It was the way he looked at her, as if she was the only real and solid thing in his entire world. She filled sketchbook after sketchbook with his image, creating tangible evidence of an obsession that burned as brightly as his own. 3 weeks into their affair, Alan invited her to a charity gala in Jersey City, the Jackson Foundation's annual fundraiser for arts education, an event that drew the absolute cream of the city's elite. Brianna hesitated, knowing that to appear with him in public would be to light a match to a powder keg of rumor and speculation, but Alan's eyes held a silent challenge. "I want you there," he stated, his voice unwavering. "Not hidden, not a secret, with me." And so Brianna found herself in a bespoke designer gown Alan had secretly commissioned for her, a column of midnight blue silk that made her skin practically luminous. He wore a tuxedo that perfectly framed his broad shoulders, highlighting the silver at his temples and his stark, almost severe masculine beauty. As she descended the grand staircase of the mansion, the composure he was so famous for simply shattered. "You're," he began, then stopped, his voice thick. "You are the single most beautiful woman he have ever laid eyes on." At the gala, he was perfectly attentive while maintaining propriety, his hand finding the small of her back for a brief, possessive touch, his focus always returning to her, even as he commanded the room. Brianna watched him in his natural habitat, a man born to lead, brimming with charisma, and felt a surge of pride so fierce it was almost painful, mixed with a possessiveness that startled her. This brilliant, difficult, beautiful man was hers. And then a woman approached, a vision of diamonds and inherited entitlement. "Alan, darling." She touched his arm with an air of casual ownership that made Brianna's defenses spring to life. "I didn't expect to see you here. I thought you were still in Tuscany." Alan's expression became carefully, unnervingly neutral. Maristella, I didn't know you were back in the States. Just for the week, we must discuss the villa. There are renovations that require... Maristella's eyes finally fell upon Brianna and something cold and calculating flickered within their depths. I don't believe we've been introduced. Brianna Harper. Alan set his hand moving to rest with deliberate possession on Brianna's lower back. Brianna, this is Maristella Rothschild. The name landed with the force of an institution. Rothschild as in the banking dynasty. The woman was stunning, but in that sterile, ageless way that expensive surgery and a team of personal trainers could provide. She was likely in her 40s, precisely the kind of polished society fixture who belonged on Alan's arm. Brianna despised her on sight. Harper, Maristella mused, savoring the name. Are you related to Cecily Harper, Alan's friend? The hesitation before the word friend was a deliberate, perfectly aimed barb. Brianna felt her smile turn razor sharp. That woman is my mother. Maristella's perfectly drawn eyebrows arched. How charming. I imagine Alan finds your presence a comfort. He always did have such a soft spot for your mother. The implication was as delicate as a stiletto and just as sharp. A hot, blinding fury surged through Brianna, and she parted her lips to unleash a venomous reply. But Alan's grip on her back suddenly firmed. Was that a warning or a plea? She bit back the words, burning her tongue. If you'll give us a moment, Alan interjected, his voice like polished steel. Brianna and I are on our way out. He guided her toward the doors with a swift, unspoken urgency. Inside the car, a thick, unbearable silence descended between them. Finally, Brianna broke. Who is she to you, really? Alan's jaw went rigid. She's a mistake I came dangerously close to making. Meaning I was going to marry her 3 years ago. The words were barely a whisper. I asked. She accepted. We had a date. Brianna's stomach plummeted. So what went wrong? I ended it on the very day I was supposed to propose. In fact, the ring was in my pocket. I'd orchestrated this whole grand dinner. And then he braked for a stoplight, his knuckles straining white against the leather of the steering wheel. I just couldn't through with it because the only person I could see in my head was you. Me, Brianna's voice was a ghost of itself. You had just gotten your master's degree. I saw a picture on Thessali's phone from your final thesis show. You were in these paint-splattered overalls, beaming with the most incredible smile, and his voice fractured. I knew then that I was about to marry Maristella, just to pretend I was over you, to force myself to believe I'd moved on. But seeing that photo, it was like admitting the most profound lie to myself, so I hired a private detective. Brianna gasped, the air catching in her throat. You did what? For what reason? To know you were all right, to know you were happy. I framed it as keeping my promise to Julian to look out for you in his memory. But the truth is I just had to be sure you were okay. He let out a harsh, self-mocking laugh. It's pathetic, right? A grown man having his best friend's daughter watch from the other side of the country because he's too weak to let go. Brianna should have felt violated, furious at the intrusion. Instead, a slow, deep warmth spread through her core. You gave the ring back. I did. Because you were thinking of me. Yes, Alan. She held his gaze until he had no choice but to look at her. I'm so glad you never married her. His face was stripped bare, utterly raw. So am I, he breathed. Later back at the estate, they came together with a desperate, newfound fire. Brianna moved above him, her hands planted on his chest, her eyes locked on his as his control began to fray. His palms clamped onto her hips, setting their pace. Tell me, she whispered a command. Tell me exactly what was on your mind when you broke off the engagement. I was thinking, he gasped, his rhythm faltering as she shifted. I was thinking about this girl in paint-splattered overalls, a girl who possessed my entire heart without having a single clue. I was thinking that I would rather spend the rest of my days utterly alone than ever settle for second best. He pulled her down, crushing his mouth to hers. Than anyone but you. I love you, Brianna declared with a fierce possessiveness. You belong to me. I need to hear you say it. Alan's laugh was a rough, beautiful sound. Love certainly makes a fool of a man. And for the record, I am yours. I have always, always been yours. When they shattered together, when the wave of ecstasy crested and finally crashed, Brianna fell against his chest, her ear pressed to the frantic thunder of his heart. Alan's arms wrapped around her, holding her as if she were the most fragile, priceless treasure in the world. I want people to know, Brianna murmured into the quiet darkness. I'm done with all the hiding. Alan's hand gently stroked her hair. Are you certain once this is out, there is no putting it back in the bottle? So let them gossip. Brianna pushed herself up, meeting his gaze without hesitation. You are the greatest thing that has ever happened to me. I will never be ashamed of us. A profound tenderness softened his features. You are without a doubt the most courageous woman I have ever known. Good. Then be courageous with me. He traced kisses across her forehead, down the bridge of her nose, and finally to her lips. All right, we navigate this together. Together. The word was a vow, a foundation for a future Brianna had never allowed herself to dream of. As she surrendered to sleep in Alan's embrace, a deep sense of peace settled over her. This was where she belonged. No matter what challenges were waiting, no matter what secrets had yet to surface, they would confront it all as one. But in their blissful ignorance, neither saw the distinct glint of a camera lens through the window, perfectly capturing their entwined silhouettes. The squall they had just survived was a summer shower compared to the hurricane that was gathering force just offshore. But for tonight, they had this moment, and it was everything. The morning after this gala, Brianna awoke to an empty bed, golden sunlight pouring through the immense windows. She stretched languidly, savoring the sweet, lingering ache in her body from a night of unrestrained passion. A note left on his pillow, penned in his strong, decisive script, brought a smile to her face. Called into an emergency board meeting, will be back from the city before noon. There's fresh coffee, and I haven't stopped thinking about you since I left your side an hour ago. And I won't stop until I can hold you again. Yours, A. Brianna clutched the note to her heart, overcome with a giddy, almost childish joy. And then she recalled the gallery, the forbidden room filled with her own creations. She had been so swept up in Alan and the raw, consuming storm of their affair that she hadn't given that room a second thought since the day of his staggering confession. But now, with the house still and quiet around her, a relentless curiosity began to tug at her. She approached the door, and this time it swung open at her touch. The access code given to her 2 days ago had been an act of faith from Alan that left a knot in her throat. She drifted through the gallery, now a ghost in a shrine she finally understood was built for her. This wasn't a collection of her art. It was a chronicle of his adoration, a silent testament to years of watching the one person he believed was utterly forbidden. Her steps faltered before a painting of the New York skyline, a piece created by the girl she was at 18. In the perfectly angled light, the brass plaque gleamed, the artist's first masterpiece. But for the first time, her eyes caught something else entirely. Tucked behind the canvas, almost perfectly concealed, a small archival box was affixed to the wall. With trembling hands, she lifted the heavy painting from its hooks. The box bore a single date, her 18th birthday, and was sealed with archival tape meant to last a lifetime. Yet that seal, meant to be permanent, had been meticulously broken and then tenderly reapplied over and over again. The tape was a fragile lattice of creases and where a map of someone's pilgrimage back to this hidden spot year after year. A cold, heart-stopping certainty washed over her. She knew what lay inside. It was her letter. The one penned in a haze of champagne adolescent bravery and the foolish, beautiful conviction that love was invincible. She had buried that memory, a youthful humiliation she'd convinced herself had been lost in the mail or discarded without a thought. But to know he had not only kept it, but had returned to it so often the seal itself had frayed with devotion. The air left her lungs in a painful rush. She broke the fragile seal one last time. Inside her own script, wilder and more naive, stormed across the ridiculously expensive paper she had bought just for this moment of confession. Her fingers shook as she unfolded the crisp pages, staring down at the ghost of a girl she had been 6 years prior. Dear Alan, it's 2 a.m. I'm sitting in your garden. The lights from my 18th birthday party are out, but I'm still here. The gift you gave me, the platinum artist's palette necklace, it's around my neck right now. I don't think I'll ever take it off. And then you were just gone. You didn't even say goodbye. I realized then that I can't let another second go by without saying it. I am completely in love with you. It's been true since I was 16 years old. Since that summer I spent on your lawn trying to capture the skyline on canvas. You would sit with me for hours talking about art, about beauty, about what it means to make something that endures. I know how you see me. I'm just a kid. I'm Julian's daughter, a responsibility. But I'm 18 now. I'm an adult, and this feeling for you isn't some childish crush that's going to fade. God, I've tried to kill it. I dated boys I didn't care about. I buried myself in my studies. I even moved halfway across the country. None of it worked. You're the ghost in every canvas. I hear your voice in every brushstroke. I mix my colors trying to replicate the way you see the world. I don't expect you to love me back. I'm not blind to the years between us or how messy this is with our families. I'm just asking, please wait for me. Let me catch up. Let me become someone who deserves to stand beside you. And maybe then one day you won't see your best friend's little girl anymore. You'll just see me. I'll be yours, Alan, if you'll have me. 5 years and 10, in however long it takes, just please don't write me off. Just give me the hope that one day you might. All yours, Brianna. Tears tracked silently down her face as she finished reading. The staggering honesty of that girl, her heart laid bare on the page, the impossible hope. And that's how Alan found her sitting on the floor, the letter in her hands. He froze in the doorway, simply staring. Then, with the grim resolve of a man walking to the gallows, he crossed the room to a cabinet seamlessly built into the gallery wall. Alan, she whispered, her voice cracking as she finally looked up. There's something you need to see, he answered, his voice rough as he retrieved an ornate wooden box from a locked drawer, a box meant for treasures. His own hands were unsteady as he lifted the lid. Nestled inside were 3 pristine sealed envelopes. Her name was on each one, written in his strong, familiar script, each one dated and perfectly preserved. He offered them to her with the reverence of a man surrendering his own heart. This one, he began, his voice barely a murmur. I wrote it the night I got your letter. This one, Bo, is from the day you graduated college. And this, he paused, is from 3 months ago, just before your mother asked if you could spend the summer here. She accepted them, the sheer weight of unspoken years heavy in her hands. Alan, why wouldn't you ever send them? Because sending them, he said, his eyes glittering with unshed tears, would have been a confession, an admission of what I am. A man who loves someone he has absolutely no right to want. She sank onto the gallery bench, caught in the crossfire of her art, in their shared secret history. With a deep, shuddering breath, she broke the seal on the first envelope. Alan turned his back to her, unable to witness the moment. My dearest Brianna, the letter started his usually flawless handwriting, showing the strain of a man undone. The elegant script was nearly a scrawl of motion bleeding through the ink. Your letter is in my hands. I've read it so many times I fear the paper will turn to dust. I know I should burn it. I should force myself to forget a single word was ever written. Instead, I am writing this a reply that will never reach you because you deserve far better than the coward I have become. You wrote that you've loved me since you were 16. I've loved you for so long, I don't even remember when it began. For a while, you were just Julian's daughter. Then suddenly you became this phenomenal woman and my entire world ignited just because you were in it. You are 18, I am 37. Can you even grasp how deeply wrong that is? Do you understand the sheer number of laws, social norms, and fundamental moral codes I would shatter by taking what you've so generously laid at my feet? You should be with someone young, someone whose life isn't a tangled mess, a man who can offer you a simple, normal love, unburdened by the wreckage of our past. You are worth so much more than a man who stares at his ceiling all night, haunted by thoughts of you. A man who has to physically clench his fists to keep from reaching for you. A man who watches you laugh and feels a piece of himself die because he can't be the source of that sound. I don't possess the strength of character to simply let you go. God knows I've tried, but I am selfish enough to treasure this letter, to cling to this single piece of evidence that in another time, another life where the years between us vanished and our stories weren't so tragically intertwined, we might have created something truly beautiful together. You are without question the most breathtaking person I have ever laid eyes on, Brianna, and I will never be worthy of you. I will carry my love for you in silence for the rest of my days if that is the price for your happiness and your freedom. I am sorry. I am so profoundly sorry that I can never be the man you need me to be. Yours, though, I possess no right to the title Alan. Brianna's tears bled into the page-smearing ink that had been dry for 6 years. When she looked up, Alan was a rigid silhouette against the windows, his back turned to her, his entire frame trembling with the strain of keeping himself from falling apart. She reached for the second letter, the one he'd sent when she graduated from college. This one was more concise, penned on the stationery of some distant hotel. Dearest Brianna, I'm writing this from Singapore, watching you graduate on a tiny laptop screen in a sterile hotel room because I am too much of a coward to face you in person. You're adorned with your honors cord, and you've just thrown your head back, laughing at a joke from the student beside you. And in this moment, I have never felt such a crippling combination of pride and utter heartbreak. 4 years ago, you promised you would wait for me. I have spent every one of those years praying you wouldn't keep that promise, that you would discover someone who deserved you and finally forget about the 37-year-old man who failed you. But here you are, 22 years old, and earlier today I sent you a bouquet of flowers that I couldn't even attach my name to. And I am still completely in love with you, still utterly without hope, still chained to the belief that loving you from an ocean away is the only decent thing left for me to do. Your mother mentioned you're seeing someone, an artist from your program. I truly hope he brings you joy. I hope he can give you all the things I can't. I hope you've forgotten all about a letter penned by an 18-year-old girl and the man who has clutched it like a holy relic ever since. And yet a selfish, broken part of me prays that you haven't. Some small part of me clings to the insane hope that the universe might one day shift on its axis and finally grant me the chance to love you as you were always meant to be loved. Until that impossible day, I'll remain here in Singapore sending anonymous flowers and pretending to be happy that you are flourishing without me. You have grown into everything I always knew you would be. I am utterly in awe of you. Yours. Always, even if I'm never allowed to be Alan. Her hands trembled uncontrollably as she unfolded the third letter. This one was far more recent, written just 3 months ago on his personal letterhead. Dear Brianna, Thessaly phoned me today. She asked if you might be able to stay at the estate during your residency in Jersey City. She's accepted a 6-month post in London and is worried about you living by yourself in the city. She is completely unaware that her simple question represents the convergence of my most fervent dream and my absolute worst nightmare. You are 24 now, a fully grown woman, a celebrated artist, a person who has forged an entire existence that has nothing to do with me. The right answer is no. I should fabricate a business trip, claim a scheduling conflict, devise any excuse to avoid the exquisite torture of having you under my roof for 6 months, close enough to breathe your air, yet so forbidden it would unravel my sanity. But I am going to say yes. I am going to subject myself to this torment because I am a weak and selfish man, and I have loved you for so long that even the agony of having you near is preferable to the vast hollow emptiness of your absence. I have no idea what will unfold when you get here. I will likely humiliate myself, probably betray emotions I have spent years burying. A part of me wants that to happen. A part of me is desperate for this to be the moment I finally abandon nobility and embrace the terrifying truth. 6 years ago, you wrote me a letter and offered me your entire world. I still lack the courage to claim it. But perhaps, just maybe after 6 months of seeing you every morning, of hearing your voice in the halls, of simply existing in the same space, perhaps then I will find the strength to finally tell you everything. That I love you, that loving you is the only thing that has ever felt true. That you are the dream I never allowed myself to have, and the only thing in this world I have ever truly wanted. I am writing this letter I will never mail as a confession of all the things I'm too afraid to say to your face. If you ever read this, by the time you read this, perhaps everything will be different. Maybe I will have finally become a man worthy of the gift you offered. Or maybe I will have shattered everything by revealing an intensity of feeling I can no longer suppress. No matter what happens, know this one thing, Brianna Harper. You are loved. You are loved fiercely, completely, and irrevocably by a man who has spent a decade failing to become someone who deserves you. Yours in every way that truly counts, Alan. Brianna gently placed the letters on the table, her own tears having blurred the world beyond recognition. Her gaze swept over Alan, truly seeing him for the first time, not as the titan of industry or her mother's confidant, but as a man who had silently adored her for years, who had torched his own chance at happiness in a desperate, misguided effort to guard hers. You absolute fool, she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. A broken, hollow laugh escaped him. I know. We threw away 6 years. I made you miserable. I made myself miserable, all because I convinced myself it was the honorable thing to do. He sank to his knees before her, his hands hovering over her legs, wanting to touch her, but terrified he didn't have the right. Brianna closed the distance, pulling him to her and claiming his lips in a kiss that spoke of years of unspoken longing. When she finally drew back, she rested her forehead against his. No more silence. No more tragic, noble suffering. Swear it. I swear. At last, his hands cupped her face, holding high her as if she were the most fragile, precious thing in the world. No more hiding. No more walls. I love you. I will never not love you. Brianna kissed him again, a soft, sealing promise. I have been yours since I was 16 years old. A few lost years can't change a thing. A sound tore from Alan's throat, half laugh, half wrenching sob, as he pulled her tight against his chest. They stood that way for an eternity, holding each other in a private gallery built from his devotion, surrounded by a lifetime of loving her from a distance. When they finally separated, Brianna saw the anguish in his eyes had been replaced by a new resolve. "There is more," he said, his voice low. "More that I have to show you, more you deserve to know. About your father and about a promise I made." He rose to his feet, offering her his hand. "Come with me." Brianna let him guide her into his private study, a space she had almost never entered. It was a fortress of masculinity, all dark wood and worn leather. But it was the wall of photographs that immediately captured her attention. There was Alan in countless public moments, shaking hands with world leaders, accepting awards, standing before skyscrapers that bore his name. But woven between these images of power were private snapshots. Her mother Thessaly at different ages, and Brianna growing up year by year, then taking pride of place on his desk in a heavy silver frame, a photo of two young men on a beach, arms thrown around each other, laughing at something just out of view. Brianna lifted the photograph, her eyes scanning the details. One of the men was undeniably Alan, likely in his mid-20s, raw and less refined, but the intensity in his eyes was the same. The other man, "That's my father," she breathed, the realization hitting her like a physical blow. Because there was Julian Harper, alive and incandescent, in a way she had never witnessed in the handful of faded pictures her mother kept. He looked radiant, utterly carefree. His eyes, Brianna's eyes, were crinkled with a genuine, unburdened joy. "We were in the Bahamas," Alan said softly from behind her, "celebrating right after we closed our first major deal. Your father and I started a tech company right out of college. We were just two kids with more ambition than common sense. This was taken the week we sold it for enough money to build our next dream. You weren't just business partners. We were brothers." Alan's voice was heavy with memory, not by blood, by choice. "Julian was my other half, my best friend, the only person on this earth I trusted completely. We built our entire world together." Brianna turned the photograph over. On the back, in a familiar script she knew from old birthday cards, were the words, "To my brother in all but blood, forever. Jay." "He died when I was 3, Brianna said, a tightness gripping her chest. "It was a car accident." "Yes." Alan took the picture from her, his touch almost reverent. "We were driving home from a late-night meeting 21 years ago. Another car blew through a red light and Julian saved my life." The words came out shattered. "He was behind the wheel. He saw the car coming and he swerved. He took the full impact on his side of the car to protect mine. He pushed me away even though it meant—" Alan couldn't finish the sentence. He collapsed into his heavy desk chair as if his own legs had given out from under him. Brianna moved toward him on instinct, kneeling on the floor in front of him, mirroring the way he had knelt for her only moments before. "It wasn't your fault," she whispered, the truth of everything flooding through her. "He died saving me. Your father died, and I walked away, and I have—" His voice shattered. "I have spent 21 years just trying to be worthy of that sacrifice, trying to honor him by taking care of the two people he loved more than life itself, you and Thessaly. That's why you were always there. The promise you mentioned." Alan nodded, his eyes bright with tears he'd held back for 2 decades. "In the hospital, just before, Julian was conscious for a minute or two, just long enough." He stopped, swallowing against the lump in his throat. "He said, 'Take care of my girls, Alan, Thessaly, and Brianna. Promise me.' So I promised. For 21 years, I have done nothing but keep that promise. And every piece of the puzzle of her life slammed into place, Alan's unwavering presence. The way he had quietly provided for them, funded her education, appeared at every graduation and birthday. She had always written it off as a deep friendship, an obligation he felt to a dead man's family. She had never once conceived of the crushing weight of his guilt. "So is that all I am to you?" The question escaped her lips before she could stop it, sounding small and terribly afraid. "An obligation, a way to repay a debt to my father." Alan's head snapped up, his grief-stricken expression consumed by a sudden, fierce fire. With a sudden, desperate strength, he seized her hands and pulled her crashing onto his lap. "No, dear God, is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think anymore. You just admitted you've spent 21 years looking after me out of some kind of duty. I spent 15 years looking after you out of duty." Alan corrected, his hands coming up to cage her face, tilting it until her gaze had nowhere to go but his. 15 years of playing Uncle Alan, of honoring my debt to Julian by making sure his little girl was safe, that she had everything she needed. But then, you weren't a little girl anymore. You blossomed into this incredible, breathtaking woman, and I fell. I fell so hard, breaking every promise I ever made to myself, knowing that loving you felt like spitting on Julian's grave. How could loving me possibly be a betrayal? Because his last wish was for me to protect you. Alan's voice cracked thick with torment. He charged me with looking after you, with being your guardian, not not to fall for you, not to desire you the way I do. He choked on the words, his breathing ragged. Every single time my hands are on you, every night we spend together, I feel like I'm desecrating the memory of the man who took a bullet for me. Her heart shattered for the agony he was in. Julian never asked you to live a solitary life. His wish was for me to care for his daughter, not to take her to my bed. I'm the one who seduced you, Brianna insisted. I sent that letter. I was the one who kissed you in the storm. I've been the one chasing you from the start. You just don't get it. His hands fell away from her, his face a mask of pure anguish. Julian is in the ground because of me. This entire life I have every success. It's all built on the fact that he's gone and I'm still breathing. How can I stand here and take his daughter too? How can I have it all when he has nothing but a headstone? The sheer agonizing weight of his guilt was overwhelming. And in that moment, she finally saw it all. Why he had battled their connection with every fiber of his being. Why he'd starved himself of happiness for all these years. He was serving a life sentence for the crime of staying alive. Julian adored you, she whispered. He told everyone you were his brother. Can you honestly believe he would want you to live out your days in misery? I have no idea what he would have wanted. He's been gone for 21 years. So maybe it's finally time to stop letting a promise made 2 decades ago chain you to the past. Brianna gently took his face in her hands, forcing his eyes to meet hers. I am not some little girl you're bound by duty to protect. I am a woman and I am in love with you. Can't that just be enough? I need it to be. Alan's voice was a fractured whisper. Brianna, I desperately want that to be enough. But whenever we're together, his voice echoes in my mind. Look after my girls. And I'm haunted by the thought that this isn't what he meant. But what if it is, Brianna challenged. What if looking after me means loving me, being my partner, building a life that makes me happy? What then? Alan just gazed at her, the concept so utterly alien it left him speechless. I always assumed, you assumed that suffering was the only penance, the only way to honor him. But what if living is the real tribute? Brianna leaned forward, her lips brushing his in a soft kiss. What if true happiness, loving me, creating a future side by side? What if that was the promise you were always meant to keep? For what felt like an eternity, Alan simply held her close, burying his face in the silk of her hair as his breathing hitched and shuddered. When he at last drew back, a subtle change had settled over his features. He wasn't healed, not by a long shot, but a new openness was there. I don't know if this guilt will ever go away, he confessed, his voice raw. I'm not asking for a miracle. I'm just asking you to try. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, and then a shadow crossed his face as another memory surfaced. There are other things you deserve to know about Julian. He trailed off, his jaw clenching. About where all my money came from. And for the next hour, the floodgates opened, and Alan told her everything. It started with an insurance settlement from the drunk driver. Blood money. He had wanted to burn every last cent of it, but he couldn't. He explained how he'd taken that tainted cash, his stomach churning with guilt, and poured it into his first major investment. He described how it had exploded, each dollar breeding another, until a vast empire had risen from the ashes. And he confessed how every single victory felt like another theft from Julian's life. Everything I possess goes back to the accident that took your father from this world. Alan said, his voice an empty echo. I constructed a kingdom on the foundation of his death, and then I had the audacity to fall for his daughter. Tell me that isn't the most warped thing you've ever heard. Brianna's attention, however, was fixed on something else entirely. A thick document Alan had retrieved from his safe. It detailed a trust fund established 21 years prior with massive deposits made every quarter like clockwork. Tens of millions of dollars, all earmarked for one Brianna Harper. What? What is this? She managed to ask, her voice trembling. 50% of every single dollar I've ever earned. Alan refused to meet her gaze. I couldn't touch it. The money never felt like it belonged to me. Half of everything is for you and Thessaly. It always has been. We had no idea. I never wanted you to. This wasn't some act of charity. It was... He stopped the fight draining out of him. It was the only thing that let me sleep at night, knowing Julian's girls were taken care of, that if I were gone tomorrow, you two would be secure. You've been secretly siphoning off half of your entire fortune for 21 years. Brianna's head spun as she tried to grasp the enormity of it. And you never said a word. It was never my money in the first place. Brianna slapped the papers down and seized his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her stare. You are without a doubt the most infuriating, noble, self-punishing fool I have ever known. The faintest hint of a smile played on his lips. I've heard that once or twice. Julian would never have wanted this for you. He wouldn't have wanted you to live in this self-made prison. You can't possibly know what he would have wanted. Actually, Brianna said, her voice trailing off as a distant memory surfaced. I think I just might. He might have. Mom mentioned once that Dad said something right before he passed. It was about you. Her brow furrowed, chasing the memory. He wanted you to look after us, of course, but he also said you deserved your own happiness. Alan went perfectly still. Brianna pressed on. I asked Mom about it years ago when I was maybe 15. She told me he made you swear to protect us. But there was more. Brianna closed her eyes, reaching for the echo of the words. He said you were the finest man he knew, and that you deserved to find love. That you shouldn't waste your life alone. Alan's voice was a fractured whisper. He said that, ask Mom, her memory of it is better than mine. For the first time since she'd entered his office, the haunted look in Alan's eyes began to recede. If Julian truly said that, if he wanted me to be happy, then maybe. He pulled her into a desperate embrace, burying his face in her hair. Maybe loving you isn't a betrayal. Maybe it's the only decent thing I've done with the life he left me. It is. Brianna held him fast. We are the decent thing, Alan, you and me. They stood locked together as the afternoon light bled into evening outside. There were still truths left to uncover, still battles yet to face. But in that office, surrounded by the ghost of a man they both adored and the evidence of a life's devotion, something broken inside each of them began to knit itself back together. I love you, Alan breathed against her hair. Not because of Julian and not because of a promise. It's because you are you. Because you are the sole light in my world, the very reason I get up each day. You're the only thing that has ever felt truly real. And Brianna silenced him with a kiss, pouring 6 years of aching frustration and adoration into it. When they finally broke for air, both of them breathless, she smiled against his lips. Take me to bed, she murmured. Make love to me, and this time I want you to forget the guilt, the obligations, and whether you think you deserve this. Just feel how much I love you. Alan carried her to his room and laid her down with a reverence that made her throat ache. He undressed her slowly, his hands and mouth worshiping every inch of skin he uncovered. And when he finally moved over her, their bodies joining with a deliberate, heart-stopping slowness, he kept his eyes locked on hers. I see you, he whispered, moving inside her with profound care. Not Julian's little girl, not a responsibility. Just you, Brianna, the woman I love more than my own life. I see you too, Brianna gasped, her fingers tangling in his hair. Not a guardian, not a family friend, just Alan, the man who has owned my heart since I was old enough to know what loving someone meant. They moved as one building towards a peak that was far greater than physical pleasure. This was absolution. This was a promise made flesh. When they shattered in unison, his face buried in her neck, as her nails dug into his shoulders, the moment felt sacred. Later, lying tangled in the sheets, as the city lights painted patterns on their skin, Alan traced lazy circles on her hip. Your mother's weekly call is tomorrow, he said quietly. Brianna tensed. We have to tell her. I know. She's going to... Brianna trailed off, uncertain what her mother's reaction would be. Anger, disappointment, sheer horror. She likely already knows, Alan said. Your mother is terrifyingly perceptive. I would be astonished if she hasn't sensed that something shifted between us. Brianna propped herself on an elbow to study his face. Are you afraid of how she'll react? Terrified. The admission was simple and starkly honest. Thessaly is my oldest friend. Her opinion means the world to me. He paused, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. But not more than you. Nothing means more than you. The next morning, they waited for the video call together, their shared nerves making them feel like a pair of teenagers. When her mother's face appeared on the screen, impossibly elegant, and knowing even from across the ocean, Brianna's carefully prepared speech disintegrated. You look happy, sweetheart. Thessaly said, her gaze shifting between Brianna and Alan, who was just out of frame. Happier than I have seen you in years. Mom, we need to tell you something. That you and Alan are finally an item. Thessaly's smile was gentle. Darling, I have known how Alan feels about you for years. Did he honestly think I wouldn't notice? Stunned, Alan moved into the camera's view. You knew, of course I knew, she chuckled. Alan, you look at my daughter as if she personally hung the stars in the sky. You've looked at her that way since, Thessaly paused, calculating. Her 18th birthday, I would guess. Possibly longer. Brianna's mind was reeling. And you never said anything. What precisely was I supposed to say? Alan was clearly fighting himself, trying to do the honorable thing, and you were young, building a life of your own. I trusted that you would both find your way when the time was right. That's why you took the London job, Alan said slowly. You knew I'd be here, that Brianna would be. I didn't set anything up, Thessaly corrected gently. I simply removed myself from the equation. The London position was quite real and necessary. But yes, I did suspect that giving you both a little time and space might finally allow you to be honest about what you've both been feeling for so long. You're not angry. Brianna's voice was a whisper. She couldn't wrap her head around how simple this was. Angry. Honey, angry is the last thing I am. I'm relieved. For years, I've had a front row seat to your suffering, watching the two of you dance around a truth that was screamingly obvious to the rest of the world. Alan is the finest man I have ever known. If you had to give your heart to someone, I couldn't have handpicked a better man myself. A wave of emotion washed over Alan's face, his eyes glistening. Thessaly, I'm speechless. Then don't say anything. Just promise me you'll give my daughter the love and respect she has always deserved. Promise me you'll finally stop carrying the weight of Julian's death on your shoulders and give yourself permission to be happy. Knowing she's with you, that she'll always be safe and cherished, that brings me a peace I haven't felt in a long time. I'm trying, Alan admitted, his voice thick. She's the one. She's showing me how to live again. Thessaly's features softened into a gentle smile. I'm so glad to hear that. Because there's something else, something I think you both need to hear. It's something Julian said to me right before the end. She paused, her gaze unfocused, lost in a memory from long ago. Back at the hospital, after he made you promise to look after us, Alan, he said one more thing. I've held on to it all these years because it never felt like the right moment to share it. Until now. Alan's hand instinctively found Brianna's, his fingers lacing tightly with hers. What was it? What did he say? He said, if the day ever comes that Alan falls for our little girl, when she's a woman grown, you make sure you don't stand in their way. He's the best man I know, Thessaly, and our daughter is going to need a love like ours, fierce, loyal, and absolute, a love that lasts forever. The confession settled over the room, heavy and profound. Tears carved silent paths down Brianna's cheeks. Alan let out a choked sound, a gasp of pain and disbelief, clapping a hand over his mouth as if to stifle a sob. I never knew my best friend was a prophet, he finally choked out. How in the world could he have known? Because he knew you, Thessaly answered softly. He knew the depths of your heart, your unwavering devotion, and he knew his daughter was destined to become an extraordinary woman. It wasn't a stretch to picture the two of you finding your way to each other. He gave us his blessing. Brianna breathed the realization, hitting her with the force of a wave. Before he was even gone, he approved. He did, Thessaly confirmed, a smile breaking through her own tears. So let the guilt go, Alan. You're not betraying his memory by loving her. You're honoring his final wish. You are loving his daughter with every fiber of your being, exactly as he would have wanted. That was his only request. When the call disconnected, a heavy charged silence filled the space between them. Then Alan shattered it. He pulled her into a desperate embrace and completely unraveled the sobs, racking his body, a violent release of 21 years of suffocating grief and guilt. Brianna just held him, anchoring him through the storm, murmuring soft words of comfort as her own silent tears fell. He knew, Alan repeated over and over, his voice muffled against her. All this time, he knew, Tainu, and he wanted this. He wanted you to find happiness, to love me, to finally live. Brianna eased back just enough to meet his gaze. Can you do that now, Alan? Can you finally let yourself? Alan crashed his lips against hers, their shared tears a salty testament to their pain. Yes, he breathed. I don't know if the guilt will ever vanish completely, but I can try. For you, for Julian, and for us, Brianna finished for him. Their lovemaking that followed was different, slower, deeper, imbued with a liberating sense of freedom. The shadows of guilt and shame had finally receded, leaving only two souls loving each other with the raw honesty they were always destined for. Afterwards, Alan simply held her, his face buried in the silk of her hair, as his ragged breathing slowly returned to a steady rhythm. When he eventually drew back, his eyes were bloodshot, but held a clarity she hadn't seen in weeks. The kiss that followed was one of desperate intensity, a raw outpouring of years of anguish, guilt, and at long last, profound permission. "I love you," he rasped against her skin, his voice shattered by emotion. "I love you too." Brianna gasped, the words catching in her throat as he moved within her. "All of you, the guilt, the love, the broken pieces, and the magnificent whole. All of it." But the sanctuary they had just discovered was tragically fleeting. 3 days later, her phone rang. It was Caspian Novak, an ex from 2 years ago, owner of a high-end gallery in Jersey City. Their brief relationship had imploded when Brianna saw the truth. He wasn't interested in her, but in the asset she could become. The offer he made should have been a dream come true. "I want to give you a solo exhibition." Caspian purred, his voice like polished glass. The main gallery space, a full marketing blitz, an opening night packed with every major collector and critic on the coast. "This is it, Brianna, the break of a lifetime." That's unbelievable." She stammered, her thoughts a chaotic whirlwind. "When would it be?" "There's a condition." Caspian's voice instantly changed, shedding its warmth for something cold and sharp. "I need you to cut ties with Alan Jackson." The blood in Brianna's veins turned to ice. "What?" "Oh, I know all about your little arrangement. I have pictures from the gala, very compromising pictures of the two of you leaving. The way his hands are all over you. The narrative here is explosive, Brianna. Billionaire mogul's sordid affair with his deceased best friend's daughter. The age difference, the guardianship angle. It's pure tabloid gold." "You're blackmailing me," she spat, her voice trembling with fury. "I'm presenting you with a choice. Walk away from Jackson, come back to me, and these photos disappear forever. Your career takes off clean and pristine, or you stay with him, and I burn it all to the ground by releasing everything. We'll let the public decide about your, what was that phrase you used, your daddy issues made manifest." Brianna slammed the phone down, her entire body shaking uncontrollably. When she finally found the words to tell Alan, his reaction was swift and terrifying. "What did you say his name was?" he asked, his voice devoid of all emotion. "You know what? It doesn't matter." "No," Brianna lunged, grabbing his arm. "Absolutely not. Brianna, I'm not going to kill the man." "That's a lie." Brianna invaded his personal space, her hand fisting the front of his shirt. "If you shut me out of whatever you're planning, you're putting us both in danger. Just trust me to deal with this one time," Alan pleaded. "If I don't shut this down right now, he will ruin you." "Then let him try," she retorted. "I will never be ashamed of loving you. I am done hiding, done apologizing, and I will not let some bitter man from my past dictate my future." Fire blazed in Brianna's eyes. "When this story breaks, it will be on our terms. We will control every word of it, and we will do it together." Overwhelmed, Alan pulled her into a fierce embrace, holding her as if she was the only anchor in his world. "You're the most courageous woman I've ever met," he murmured into her hair. Hours later, after her breathing had evened out in sleep, Alan slipped into his office to make a call. His tone was glacial, morphing into the ruthless billionaire who had forged an empire from sheer will. "Noah, I'm calling in a favor, and yes, it's personal. I need a complete workup on Caspian Novak. I want every financial statement, every skeleton he's ever buried, and I expect it on my desk before the sun comes up." He paused, absorbing the reply. "Also, I need you to arrange a press conference. Get every major media outlet there. Book the most impressive venue you can find. I'm delivering a statement, and I want the entire tri-state area to see it." 4 days later, Alan stood behind a podium, commanding the grand ballroom of Jersey City's most luxurious hotel. The space was a churning sea of media from all over the region, cameras flashing and reporters buzzing, desperate to know what the notoriously reclusive billionaire intended to announce. Brianna stood in the wings, watching, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She was gripped with terror that he was about to expose their secret before she was ready, but Alan managed to surprise her yet again. 21 years ago, he started, his powerful voice filling the vast room. "My best friend Julian Harper was killed in a car crash. He was just 27 years old, a brilliant mind, a dedicated husband and father. He was my brother in every way that truly counts, and losing him completely broke me. For 2 decades, I've done everything in my power to honor his memory, to live a life worthy of the one he lost. Today, I am officially launching the Julian Harper Foundation for Emerging Artists, a $300 million endowment created to support young creators with resources, mentorship, and real opportunities. A wave of stunned gasps and frantic whispers swept through the room. Alan waited for the commotion to subside before he spoke again. Julian believed that art was the very conscience of civilization. He believed in fostering talent and giving people a chance to create something beautiful in a world that is so often ugly. This foundation will offer grants, secure studio spaces, arrange exhibitions, and provide critical support to artists all across New Jersey and beyond. This is the largest private arts endowment in the history of this state, and it is the greatest privilege of my life to establish it in my best friend's name. Brianna's vision swam with tears. This wasn't what she had braced herself for. This was perfect. The foundation's director will be someone who perfectly embodies every value that Julian cherished. Someone brilliant, passionate, and visionary, a person who truly grasps what it means to make art that matters. Alan's gaze cut across the room, finding Brianna where she stood backstage. Julian's own daughter, Brianna Harper. The ballroom absolutely erupted. Brianna stood frozen as Alan gestured for her to come forward. She felt as if she were in a dream as she climbed the stairs and took her place beside him. Alan's hand settled on the small of her back, a warm and steady presence, while the profound love in his eyes was unmistakable. He spoke of her immense talent, her unique vision, and how her father's legacy was so powerfully alive through her. He never once mentioned their romance, but the way he looked at her, the sheer pride and devotion etched onto his face, told a story that the cameras eagerly captured. In the chaotic aftermath of the announcement, amid a storm of questions and congratulations, Brianna found her way to Alan's private office off the ballroom. He had managed it flawlessly, seizing control of the narrative. He had given her a platform so immense it made Caspian's gallery seem utterly insignificant. "You are unbelievable," she whispered, pulling him down for a kiss. "I'm in love," he corrected softly. But a resolve had hardened inside Brianna. She was finished with hiding. Before Alan could begin to guess her intentions, she turned and walked back out to the stage where reporters were still milling about. "I have something I'd like to add," Brianna announced into the microphone. The lingering chatter died instantly. "Alan spoke beautifully about my father's legacy, about art, and giving people a chance. But there is another truth that needs to be told. Something I need all of you to hear." Alan materialized at the side of the stage, his face a mask of panic and awe. Brianna met his gaze, offering a confident smile. "I want to thank Alan Jackson not just as the founder of this incredible opportunity, but as the man that I love." She let the statement hang in the charged air, watching the room explode. "I am fully aware that our age difference will raise questions. I know that our family history makes this situation complicated, but Alan has been the most honorable, devoted, and extraordinary man I have ever had the privilege of knowing. He is my partner. He is my love. And if the world takes issue with that, then that is the world's problem, not ours." The statement was audacious, reckless, and profoundly true. As Brianna watched this journalist scramble to capture every word, their camera zooming in on her, she felt an unshakable sense of certainty. Alan strode onto the stage and, rather than trying to contain the chaos, he simply reached for her hand. "Brianna Harper is the love of my life," he declared into the microphone, his voice both steady and absolute. "I have loved her for years, and I resisted that love for far longer than I ever should have. I will not apologize for what we are to each other. Her father was my closest friend, a brother to me, and I know he would have wanted nothing more than for both of us to find happiness. I plan on dedicating the rest of my days to ensuring she has it." He leaned in and kissed her forehead as 100 camera flashes erupted and the entire room exploded into a wall of sound. But Brianna heard only the frantic rhythm of her own heart and felt only the security of Alan's arms around her. In that moment, she knew they had achieved the impossible. They had seized control of their own narrative. The media fallout was instantaneous and immense, yet surprisingly, the prevailing sentiment was positive. Of course, there were the pearl-clutching critics who penned columns on power imbalances and impropriety, but their narrative, the one they had forged in that moment, was the one that took hold, a love story founded on loyalty and legacy. A billionaire honoring the memory of his dearest friend by cherishing the daughter he left behind. Caspian's attempt at blackmail was dead on arrival. Alan's publicity team had already framed the narrative so perfectly that any attempt to twist it into something sordid would now appear transparently petty and malicious. Brianna's phone was overwhelmed with interview requests and offers from galleries so prestigious they made Caspian's proposition seem utterly laughable. She had won, they had won, but the victory felt incomplete, as if one final piece had yet to fall into place. 3 days after the press conference, a video call came in from Thessaly, whose expression was a mixture of gravity and hope that Brianna had never seen on her before. 6 months later, Brianna was standing in the magnificent ballroom of the Alpine estate, enveloped by the world of artists, collectors, and critics who had all gathered for the Julian Harper Foundation's inaugural gala. At 25, she had fully embraced her role as director. She had awarded life-altering grants and had sculpted something truly meaningful out of her father's legacy. The evening was a spectacular success, but Brianna's entire focus was fixed on Alan, watching her from the other side of the room with that particular gaze, the one that still had the power to take her breath away. It was the look that said, in a world full of illusions, she was his only truth. As the speeches drew to a close, he crossed the room to her side, extended his hand, and said, "Dance with me." He led her onto the floor just as the band started a slow ballad, and Brianna felt herself melt into his embrace. At 56, he possessed a distinguished air that had only deepened with time, the silver at his temples like fine threads of platinum in his dark hair. The age difference, which had once felt like an insurmountable canyon between them, now seemed entirely irrelevant. He belonged to her and she belonged to him. Everything else was just noise. "I have something for you," Alan whispered against her ear as they moved together. "I've been carrying it for weeks, completely terrified of finding the perfect moment." He pulled back just enough for her to see the uncharacteristic nervousness in his eyes. Before she could even begin to ask what was happening, Alan was sinking to one knee in the center of the grand ballroom as the music faded to silence, and hundreds of pairs of eyes turned in their direction. "Brianna Harper," he started, his voice a clear, resonant anchor, even as his face was an open book of emotion. "You are the most courageous, most magnificent person I have ever had the privilege to know. You taught me that love is not something to be feared or fought against. It is something to be surrendered to with everything you are. For years, my love for you was silent. Allow me to love you out loud for all the rest of my life." He presented a ring, a bespoke piece that brought to life one of her own sketches. The artist's palette necklace he had given her at 18, now brilliantly reimagined in a constellation of diamonds and platinum. Brianna's world blurred through a sudden veil of tears. "Will you marry me?" Alan asked. "Will you let me wake up with you every morning, create art and legacy and beauty by your side, and build a life that honors your father's memory by becoming what he always wanted for us? Happy, whole, and together." Oblivious to her designer gown and the captivated audience, Brianna sank to her knees to meet him. "Yes." He leaned in and gave her a deep, possessive kiss, and the ballroom erupted into a storm of applause. When they finally drew apart, Alan gently slid the exquisite ring onto her finger. 1 year later, Brianna stood on a terrace at the Jackson estate, gazing out over the Hudson River as the setting sun painted the sky in vivid strokes of orange and gold. At 26, wearing a simple gown with the diamond and platinum palette necklace at her throat, she had never felt more like herself. 20 guests were seated in elegant chairs, making the ceremony both intimate and perfect. Thessaly stood before them, having acquired a special ordination just for this day, so she could officiate. She was the picture of elegance and joy, with happy tears already making their way down her face. Alan was waiting at the altar, his eyes holding an entire universe whenever they looked at Brianna. The ceremony was brief and the words were simple. When it came time for their vows, Brianna began. "Alan, you saw me long before I ever saw myself. You loved me when you were convinced you shouldn't. You fought it and you failed, and I am so incredibly grateful for that failure. You are the most beautiful promise anyone has ever kept, the promise you made to my father that you would look after his girls. The promise you made to yourself to live a life of honor, and now the promise you are making to me to love me for the rest of yours. I promise to love you back, to create a beautiful life with you, and to build a legacy that would make my father proud. You are my always, my home, and my heart." Alan choked out his vows, his voice a raw, unsteady rasp, thick with unshed tears. "Brianna, you were the fantasy I never allowed myself to entertain, the love that pulled me from an existence of regret and isolation, the solitary beacon in 30 years of suffocating darkness. I will love you with every breath I have left and far beyond it. I will champion your art, revel in your triumphs, and be your anchor through any defeat. I will open my eyes each morning with overwhelming gratitude that you chose me, that you looked past the years between us, our tangled history, and the impossibly complex family ties to see the man who has loved you with desperation for so long. You are my absolution, my purest joy, my eternity. I am yours in every conceivable way forever." As Thessaly pronounced them, husband and wife, and Alan brought his lips to Brianna's in a kiss of reverent passion. A low rumble of thunder echoed from the horizon. Their storm, their beginning. The circle was now complete. The reception was a close-knit affair alive with joyous laughter. As the last light of day faded, they danced by themselves on the terrace. He held her close, her head resting on his shoulder. Just behind them, framed by the study windows, hung the monumental painting Brianna had poured her soul into for the last year. It was Alan's face rendered in a breathtaking dance of light and shadow. Every silver thread in his hair captured with exquisite loving detail, and it was titled The Man Who Waited. While they swayed to a silent rhythm, only they could perceive, Brianna's mind drifted back over the winding, treacherous path that had led them to this perfect moment. The letters, the crushing guilt, the suffocating secrets, the shocking public declaration, every single challenge they had surmounted, every demon they had confronted, had all paved the way to this very embrace. Alan leaned in, pressing a soft kiss to her temple, and she could feel the curve of his smile against her skin. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "That I would gladly endure another lifetime of waiting if it meant I could find you all over again. That having you in my arms makes every moment of past suffering completely insignificant." His arms tightened around her. "And that, Julian, he was right. You love me the same way I loved him, with a fierceness and a loyalty that is absolute and eternal. He's the one who brought us together," Brianna whispered. "Even in death, he gave us this gift. Then I will devote every day I have left to being a man who deserves it." The defining photograph from their wedding, an image that would one day hang in the Foundation's gallery, captured their silhouettes etched against the vast, glittering New York skyline. Alan's arms were wrapped around Brianna, her head resting on his shoulder, a pose that was a near-perfect echo of an old photograph of Julian and Alan from decades before. A story of brothers, of profound love, and of a legacy finally beautifully complete. Over this powerful image, a recording of Brianna's voice from the Foundation's documentary begins to play. "They say some love stories are forbidden, but I believe ours was simply destined to be. It was a love written in kept promises, immortalized in pain across the years, and built upon the legacy of the man who loved us both so deeply that he ultimately brought us together. Alan Jackson waited for me, and I would spend 1,000 lifetimes searching just to find my way back to him. This is our forever, and it is only just beginning. And now I'd love to ask you all a few questions. Do you believe Alan's grand public proposal was truly romantic? Or did it place an unfair amount of pressure on Brianna to accept in front of so many people? If you were in Julian's shoes writing letters for after you were gone, would you ever encourage your best friend to pursue your daughter? Or is that a boundary that you feel should never be crossed? Do you think Brianna and Alan's relationship could have ever truly worked if Thessaly had disapproved, or was her blessing an absolute necessity for them to find happiness? I'm really looking forward to reading your answers in the comment section. Also, please drop a comment below sharing your single favorite moment from their journey. Take good care of yourself. I can't wait to share the next story with you. Sending you so much love.